we are recording.
It's September 14th, 2016, and we're in the studios of WJAX CBS 47 and WFOX Fox 30, and we're doing an oral history interview with Newman Martindale. Welcome, Newman.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And this is one of a series of oral history interviews that we do with the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. And we want to talk about your career in broadcasting, which includes a lot of things of interest. WJHP, WMBR, with the Voice of America, and a lot of other interesting things. So you're a native of Jacksonville.
Yes, I was born here, 1928.
Mm-hmm. And went to school here.
Yes.
Andrew Jackson.
Yes.
And college.
I went to Jacksonville University, and then I went to school in Washington, the Capital Institute of Technology.
Mm-hmm.
And later, when I went with the VOA, I went to the Foreign Service Institute.
And early in life, you became interested in broadcasting, or what?
Yes, very early. In fact, when I started, radio was all there was.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that was the only electronics really mounted to anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, police had radios, but that was pretty crude. So radio was all there was, and then of course television came along.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I really got interested in the very beginning with television.
But growing up, you kind of got interested just by listening to the radio and so
No,
forth?
I was an amateur radio operator.
Ah, yes.
W4NEN.
Okay, and
Still am.
and so were you interested in pursuing broadcasting career when you were at JU?
Yes, I was from the time I was in high school.
They didn't have a college of journalism or
No,
anything?
I didn't study anything like that. I studied electronics.
Yeah. And your first job in broadcasting at WJHP AM and FM.
Correct, yes.
And
They had their studios in the Journal building. Transmitter was on the north side of town.
And the call letters meant something. JHP.
John H. Perry, yes.
John H. Perry.
He owned the Journal and several radio stations. 2 television stations later.
And that was in an era when there was no particular objection to newspapers owning radio and TV stations.
No. There was some rules. He owned 7 radio stations, and that was the maximum he could own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember how many newspapers there were, but he also owned timberlands and pulp mills and sawmills. I mean, he was a very wealthy man.
Mm-hmm.
I think I told you earlier, he was an interesting character. He had been a B-25 pilot during the war, and he liked to fly.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he traveled everywhere in his own airplane, and the B-25 to be exact. Been modified for executive airplane.
So you went to college at JU. Soon after college, went to work at WJHP?
Actually, I was working there when I was going to school.
Oh, okay. And doing what?
At WJHP, I worked
Yeah.
at the transmitter.
Uh-huh.
Those were the days when somebody had to be on duty at the transmitter at all times.
Uh-huh.
And I was at the transmitter.
What kind of radio station was it?
It was pretty aggressive station. It had AM and FM, and studios were pretty expensive. In fact, they were interesting studios. They were in the newspaper building, but they were right above the press room. And you can imagine that. The studios were suspended because of the vibrations of the newspaper press.
Where was that? Downtown?
Yeah, it was on Laura Street. Wasn't Adams, it must have been
Mm-hmm. A building that is no longer there.
Yeah, it was, you know where the city hall is now. It used to be Cohen's department store.
Mhm.
It was next to that.
Uh-huh. And so WJHP primarily broadcasting music? What kind of music?
All kind.
Uh-huh.
Radio in those days, you know, was not just music, but everything.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Ted Chapeau had a program, Old Lazy Bones,
Huh.
and he just talked.
Yeah. Did they do any news?
Oh, yes. Interesting. I think all radio stations did it that way in those days. They would do a sports broadcast, like a baseball game, off of the news wire.
Mm-hmm.
They were not at the park. And of course, later on, they put in all kind of sound effects, so it sounded like they weren't at the park.
So they didn't bother explaining to the listeners that
No,
they were faking it?
No. In fact, it was so crude in the beginning that the guy who just had a pencil or something, he'd bang on the table for a hit.
So your next stop in your career was another kind of important venture. I guess the first TV station in Jacksonville,
Yes,
WMBR.
second TV station in the state.
Uh-huh.
First was Miami TVJ, I think it was,
Right.
in Miami.
Both on Channel 4.
Yeah. Also, Atlanta station was on Channel 4 too, the first station in the South. I don't remember the call signs.
So you were there before WMBR TV went on the air, helping
At the beginning,
build
yes.
this. Yeah.
I went there when it was under construction.
Mm-hmm.
It was on a Quonset hut, where the transmitter for the radio station was, where it is now today. The studios are.
Now, the interesting thing about television coming to Jacksonville was almost nobody had a TV set.
Yeah. And
Why would they?
They didn't think it was going to succeed either.
Well, that too, but there was no TV station, so who would have bought a TV
Yeah.
set? So when TV started, one of the big booms in town was sale of TVs at Maycohen's and all kinds of
Yes.
other places.
Big, huge things.
Yeah, everybody had to have a TV all of
Yeah.
a sudden. And of course, all the television in 1949, when that station went on the air, was live and black and white.
Yes. Very crude.
What kind of programs did they do?
Actually, it didn't do much in the beginning. We were only on the air just a few hours a day. All afternoon, we weren't on the air in the morning at all.
Mm-hmm.
In the afternoon, for several hours, just ran a test pattern.
Yeah, which people watched.
Yeah, they did. And then in the beginning, there was no cameras,
Mm-hmm.
just film. So everything was what's called kinescopes. It was actually a TV camera took a picture off of a monitor,
Mm-hmm.
and we ran those kinescopes. We had two film projectors and a slide projector, all worked off the same camera with mirrors and things. And that's the whole programming for the first 6, 8 months, I suppose.
And
No,
then you had studio cameras and
I
so
rented
forth.
2 Dumont cameras from Dumont.
Mhm.
You don't know about Dumont, probably.
Mhm.
Dumont went out of business a long time ago. They had a network at one
Mhm.
time. Anyway, I rented 2 cameras from them and bought a half-ton truck
Mhm.
and built a van on the back, a cab on the back, and had those cameras in there. And we used to do the news. The Quonset hut had 2 rooms in it. One was where the transmitter was, and the other one was where the manager's office was. And it was not very big. It was probably 10 feet square. And they used to do the news out of the manager's office. They put a camera in the hallway. shoot through the door.
And needless to say, it was live.
Everything was live
So,
except for the film.
Yeah. And a lot of local music, country and western artists and so forth. performed?
Not in the beginning. The WMBR radio studios were over on North Main Street.
Mhm.
It was called Miami Road then. Now it's Prudential Drive, I think.
Mhm.
And they were right there. And the studio, AM studio, radio studios were pretty extensive. There was 5 of them.
Mhm.
And there was one large studio. And when they got the cameras, we used to do programming out of that AM studio. Put the remote van behind the building,
Mhm.
bring the cables in, and do the programming in the studio. And one thing I remember very vividly is there was a variety show, and it had some young girls that were a trio that sang.
Mhm.
And one day, we had, in the variety show, we had alligators from the alligator farm. And they were over in the corner all taped up, and tape around their mouth. Anyway, one of the alligators started peeing on the floor. And those girls started giggling, and they giggled through the whole program. It had all kind of interesting things happen.
Nothing like live television.
Yeah.
And of course, there was no competition.
No, that's all there was.
There was no competition for a long, long time.
Yes.
The next TV station to come on the air was almost 10 years later.
Yes.
And so Channel 4, WMBR, could choose network programming from any of the networks, right?
Yes. Well, there was no network except for film in the beginning.
There was no coaxial cable
No
from
cable.
New York and so forth.
No, but later on there was. There was only one cable came from New York to Charlotte to us in Jacksonville, and from there it branched to Atlanta and South Florida. So that all the networks shared that cable.
Mhm.
So, you couldn't, the television station couldn't, although it carried all networks, it couldn't say, I want NBC today or at this time, because the cable was shared. You had to take it whenever it came.
Mhm. Your next stop was the Korean War.
Yes,
You left WMBR to go in the military.
yes,
Would that have been
1950.
okay? And what branch of the service? Air Force?
Signal Corps.
Oh, Signal Corps. Okay. What'd you do in the?
I was
Signal
with
Corps.
Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. Can't get away from it.
Yeah. And tell us.
Far East Network, it was called in the Far East.
So tell us a little bit about. Because a lot of people are not going to have a clue about.
No, don't know
what that
anything
was
about
like.
it really. It was pretty extensive. We had, I'll have to back up a little bit. When the U.S. Army occupied Japan, they took over one of NHK's networks, NHK, Nissan Hoso Kyokai, Broadcasting Corporation Japan.
Mhm.
It's like BBC. Anyway, they took over one network, the Army did, and we operated with studios in Tokyo, and there was, 8 stations in Japan, 5 in Korea, 1 in the Philippines and Okinawa. I don't remember all the rest of them, but quite a few stations. Not only, it was AM, some shortwave. There was 2 shortwave transmitters outside Tokyo. And we had 1 floor of NHK's studios, quite a bit of studios. And we did mostly stuff from the States, that recorded stateside programming.
Mhm.
It was really
So-
interesting because it took all the commercials out, so that made a problem. You gotta fill up the empty space.
And you filled it up with what?
A little short thing of some kind. It was on a 33 and a third disc.
So Armed Forces radio version of a commercial, or?
Yeah, it was
PSA?
something made just for that purpose.
Uh-huh.
Some informational thing or something
Right.
for the troops.
Some kind of a public service announcement
Yeah.
or something. And what kind of any and all kinds of variety programming from?
Yes, we did a lot of
American.
our own programming.
Mhm.
We had big studio complex. It was huge. So we did a lot of our own programming. And then, of course, there was a lot of news programs specifically for the troops, particularly for Korea. In fact, on the shortwave transmitters we did, it was kind of interesting, we did, it was called Dictate News. And the announcer would do the news speaking very slowly. So the people over in where the fighting was going on, somebody could write it down as he spoke. And then they would mimeograph it or whatever and dissimulate it to the troops.
The audience would have been primarily military personnel.
That's what
right?
it was aimed for.
But
Anybody could
Japanese
listen
and
to
Koreans
it.
could
Yeah.
listen as well.
Anybody
right?
could listen
Yeah.
to it, yes. The stations in Japan were big. In fact, the Tokyo main station was 200,000 watts. Was a big
Yeah.
transmitter, big one. And Sendai and Osaka and Nagoya were about 50,000. And the two shortwave transmitters, I think, were 20,000 each. It was a pretty good size operation. The whole network was, well, it was like a network here, a radio network in the States back before television.
And when you got out of the Army, you came back to Jacksonville,
Yes,
back to television. right?
yes, WJHP TV.
By then, WJHP had a TV license,
Yes.
and they were on the air.
No, they didn't have anything but the license.
Oh, okay. So you were helping
I'll
put
tell
them
you
on the
again.
air too.
Yeah. John Perry bought a defunct casino. It was on Phillips Highway, about Emerson Street, right in there. It was out, in those days, that was out in the boonies.
Mm-hmm.
The Peacock Club was the name of it. It had been, they were trying to clean up Florida with all of this gambling and stuff, so they raided the Peacock Club, closed it down, and John Perry bought it. It was rather interesting. I went in there after he bought it, it had been closed. There was still food in the kitchen.
And roulette wheels, or
No, they were all gone.
that was gone.
Yeah, there was two safes in the manager's office. I'm trying to think of the guy's name that ran out, Joe something, though, I can't think of his name. Anyway, in his office there was two safes. One of them was open. The other one was in the floor. So we got a locksmith to open, but there wasn't anything in it.
So we had a TV station and a former casino.
Yeah, and speaking of the roulette wheel, that's where the bookkeeper's office was.
Mm-hmm. So you were constructing that station and getting it ready to go on the air, and one of the interesting things about that radio station, that TV station, would be that it was channel 36, which was the first UHF venture
Yes.
in Jacksonville.
Yes, and it was pretty hairy at times. Sorry about that.
It was what?
Pretty hairy
Yeah.
in operation. Everything was prototype.
So, among other things, the obstacle that existed even later when Channel 17 went on the air was most people's TV sets couldn't pick up Channel 36.
Yes, they had a converter.
Yeah,
And actually, it would go out to people's houses and help them
really.
make it work.
And so that was part of marketing right away. You had to get
Yes. And the station gave converters away, too.
Yeah. In 1949, WMBR was getting people to buy TV sets, and later in WJHP, whatever year that was, you were getting people to put
That would,
converters.
yeah, that would have been 52.
52.
Yeah, closer to 53.
Yeah. And what kind of was it? Just all kinds of programming, just like Channel 4?
There was still only one coaxial cable for the networks, and we had to share the network.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what network we had now. ABC, I believe it was.
But a lot of live, of course it was live,
Yes,
local
we had.
programming.
The studios were good. The main studio was where the main dining room and the dance floor. Well, actually, the studios were the dining room. Where the dance floor and the stage was a control room, and then the bar was the second studio. And the AM studios were in the same building.
And that building is no longer there.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, the transmitter was there. The transmitter was where the kitchen was. But the tower was right behind the building. And not too many years ago, I looked over there and the foundations for the tower were still there.
How long was Channel 36 on the air?
About 4 years. It was sad. It was really going strong in the beginning, but it got less and less. And when it lost, I tell you what really did it in. The network that they had, I believe it was ABC, I might be wrong, had the World Series. Well, along this time, Channel 12 came on the air, and we were going to broadcast the World Series. Well, the network took it away from us and put it on Channel 12. That was pretty much the end of it, because they really thought they could build up their audience and everything with the World Series, and they lost it. So it went downhill ever since then. John Perry also owned Channel 2 in Daytona Beach, which had come on the air. So he moved most everything down there.
I'm wondering why he would have tried. Why didn't he try to get a VHF?
He did.
Channel? Oh, he did, and had to settle for 36.
Yes. In fact, Channel 7 was getting ready to come on the air. He offered to swap channels with them and build their station and maintain it for I don't know how many years. But of course they didn't do it. Wise move on their part, but they didn't do it.
And it was quite a few years later, I guess, when Jacksonville got its next UHF station, Channel 17. Still, the basic problem of being a UHF station, but they managed to survive.
Yes, I wasn't here then, but
yeah. By that time, after 4 years at Channel 36, you went to work for AT&T.
yeah, I worked in the long lines division, still in broadcasting, because we handled the network feeds. By that time, there was plenty of facilities for the network feed, but